She never meant to be there. She never meant to be seen. But when Evelyn Pierce, a forensic accountant who spent her entire life hiding behind spreadsheets and silence, walked into the most dangerous room in New York City, she accidentally exposed a secret that made a mafia boss freeze in front of every judge, politician, and crime lord he owned. One mistake. One number on a screen. And suddenly, the most feared man in the city couldn't stop staring at her. If you've ever wondered what happens when the wrong woman walks into the wrong room at exactly the right moment, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The package arrived on a Tuesday. No return address. No postage. Someone had placed it directly in the mailbox outside Evelyn's apartment building on West 84th Street, which meant someone had walked into her building's vestibule, lifted the brass flap with her unit number stamped on it, and pushed the envelope through by hand. That detail alone should have scared her enough to call the police. That detail alone should have made her set the package on the kitchen counter, back away slowly, and dial 911 before she even thought about touching the flap. She opened it at her kitchen table with a butter knife and a mug of cold coffee sitting 3 inches from her elbow. Later, she would think about what that said about her. Inside was a single USB drive, black and unmarked, and a handwritten note on plain white paper that said only, "You know what to do with this." A friend, no name, no explanation. The handwriting was tight and controlled, the letters pressed hard enough into the paper that she could feel the indentations with her fingertip when she turned it over. Whoever had written it had been pressing down like they were angry at the paper. Like the act of writing the note itself was a kind of violence they were trying to contain. Evelyn sat with the drive in her palm for 4 minutes. She counted. When she got nervous, she counted things. Steps to the subway. Ceiling tiles in waiting rooms. The number of times a person blinked when they were lying to her. 4 minutes with the drive in her palm. The rain coming down hard outside the window. The radiator knocking against the wall the way it always did after midnight. Then she plugged it in. What loaded onto her screen in the next 11 seconds reorganized every assumption she had made about the past 2 years of her professional life. Evelyn Pierce was 34 years old. She worked as a freelance forensic accountant, which meant that banks, insurance companies, law firms, and occasionally federal agencies hired her to look at financial records and find the things people had tried very hard to hide. She was good at it. Not good in the way people said when they meant capable, good in the way that made senior partners at law firms go quiet when she walked into conference rooms, because she had a reputation for finding discrepancies that entire audit teams had missed for years. She had testified in federal court 4 times. She had helped recover $67 million in fraudulent insurance claims. She had once, during a deposition that lasted 9 hours, identified a fraudulent pattern in a series of transactions that the defendant's attorneys had embedded inside 30,000 pages of documents specifically to make it impossible to find. She had found it in hour 3. What she was not good at: talking to people. Walking into rooms where she didn't know anyone. Eating at restaurants where she had to ask a waiter for something. Making eye contact for longer than was strictly necessary. Her therapist, a woman named Dr. Haas, who had the extraordinarily patient face of someone who had heard everything, described it as a generalized social anxiety disorder with compulsive avoidant patterns. Evelyn described it as being built wrong. She had no close friends. She had colleagues she communicated with by email. She had a sister in Portland who called on birthdays and sometimes Christmas, and those calls lasted approximately 8 minutes before the silence between them grew heavy enough that one of them invented a reason to hang up. She had a cat named Chart, short for nothing, she just liked the word, who was orange and mean and slept on her financial documents without remorse. She had her work. She had her numbers. She understood numbers in a way she had never understood people, because numbers didn't pretend. Numbers didn't perform. You added them up, and they told you the truth whether you wanted to hear it or not. What loaded on her screen told her the truth. The files on the drive were financial records, shell company filings, wire transfer logs, corporate registration documents spanning 11 years across 6 countries. At first glance, they looked like what any competent money laundering operation looked like. Layered, dispersed, deliberately complicated. The kind of structure that was designed to make investigators give up out of sheer exhaustion. 14 layers of corporate ownership, subsidiaries that existed only to own other subsidiaries, money moving in patterns that looked random until they didn't. Evelyn had her yellow legal pad out in 40 seconds. She was drawing the ownership chart before she had finished reading the first document. Her hand moved fast and automatic, the way it always did when something interesting was happening in the numbers. Chart. The cat jumped onto the table and she moved him to the floor without looking at him. By 2 in the morning, she had filled 6 pages of the legal pad. By 3, she had cross-referenced 3 of the shell companies against public records she pulled from state and corporation databases. By 4:30, she was sitting back in her chair with her hands flat on the table, staring at a name she had seen before. Voss Meridian Holdings, LLC. She had seen it 18 months ago, briefly, during a due diligence assignment for a midtown law firm that had hired her to vet a potential real estate investment. She had flagged the company as having an opaque ownership structure and recommended against the investment. The law firm had thanked her for her time and paid her invoice and apparently proceeded with the investment anyway, because 3 months later, she had seen Voss Meridian Holdings' name in the business section of the Times in connection with a commercial development deal on the West Side waterfront worth $400 million. The name at the top of the ownership chain, the actual human being who ultimately controlled every subsidiary, every shell company, every wire transfer in those files, was Damien Voss. She knew who Damien Voss was. Everyone in New York City who paid attention knew who Damien Voss was. In the way that you knew about weather systems and traffic and other forces that shaped your environment without your consent. He was 41 years old. He had inherited control of the Voss syndicate from his father at 26, after what newspapers had described at the time as a tragic accident, and what everyone in the city understood to mean something considerably less accidental. He ran legitimate businesses, real estate development, private equity, a restaurant group, a charitable foundation that hosted an annual black tie gala, and he ran the other kind of business alongside them with the efficiency and discretion that had kept him out of federal indictment for 15 years. The FBI had tried 3 times. 3 times the cases had collapsed before trial. Witnesses recanted. Evidence went missing. Assistant U.S. attorneys got transferred to other districts for reasons that were never adequately explained. Evelyn sat with his name on her screen until Chart jumped back onto the table and sat directly on top of her legal pad. "I know," she said. The cat blinked at her. She looked at the drive, then at her screen, then at the rain streaking the window. The files on that drive were the most comprehensive financial evidence of organized crime money laundering she had ever seen assembled in one place. Whoever had compiled it had spent years doing it, and whoever had sent it to her had done so specifically because they believed she was the right person to understand it. She did not sleep. She went back to the files. The next 4 days she spent doing what she always did when she got something she couldn't put down. She disappeared into it. She barely ate. She slept in 90-minute increments on her couch with Chart wedged against the back of her knees. She filled 17 pages of legal pad. She built the full ownership map in a spreadsheet that occupied 4 monitors. She had 4 monitors mounted on a bracket above her desk, which was the one extravagance she had allowed herself in an apartment that was otherwise spare to the point of austerity. What emerged from 17 pages of legal pad and 4 monitors was something that went beyond money laundering. The funds moving through Voss Meridian Holdings and its 47 subsidiary entities were not just being cleaned, they were being directed into specific real estate developments in specific neighborhoods at specific times, into the campaign funds of city council members, state senators, and 2 federal officials whose names she recognized from news coverage of organized crime investigations, into the operating accounts of 3 judges whose names appeared nowhere in the original files, but who she had cross-referenced through public court records and property transaction databases. It was a purchase. That was the cleanest word for it. Damien Voss was not merely running a criminal enterprise. He was purchasing the city, piece by piece, transaction by transaction, with a patience and a precision that was almost architectural in its design. She would have continued staring at it indefinitely if she had not, on the 5th day, found the gala invitation. It had come in her regular mail 3 weeks earlier, and she had set it aside in the stack of things she meant to deal with and never did. The Voss Foundation Annual Charity Gala, a black tie fundraising event at the Grand Meridian Ballroom in Midtown. Tickets were $5,000. The proceeds went to youth development programs throughout the 5 boroughs, which Evelyn noted with a hollow feeling was probably the most ironic sentence she had read in a week of reading very ironic things. The reason she had received the invitation at all was that the Voss Foundation had, 2 years earlier, donated a significant sum to a nonprofit financial literacy organization that had subsequently hired Evelyn to consult on their accounting systems. The donation had put her on a mailing list she had never intended to attend. She had returned exactly 0 of the 3 follow-up RSVP requests. The gala was in 2 days. She sat with the invitation in her hand for a long time. The rational calculation was clear. She had evidence. The evidence needed to go to law enforcement, specifically federal law enforcement, given the demonstrated vulnerability of local and state agencies to corruption documented in the very files she was looking at. She should copy the drive, secure the copies, contact the FBI field office, and let professionals handle it. She knew that was the right answer. She also knew 3 things that complicated it. The first was that 2 of the 3 FBI investigations into Voss had collapsed from the inside, which meant the field office itself was not entirely safe. The second was that whoever had sent her the drive had sent it to her specifically, which implied they either couldn't or wouldn't go to law enforcement themselves. The third was something she had found buried in the wire transfer records at 2 in the morning on the 3rd day. A series of payments, 9 of them over 3 years, totaling approximately $4 million, directed to an account she had not been able to fully trace. The payments were recent. The most recent was 6 weeks ago. Something was happening inside Voss's organization. Something that whoever had sent her the drive wanted her to understand before she did anything else with it. She needed to see him. She needed to see the room he occupied, the people around him, the way the money moved in the physical spaces where he operated. She had spent 5 days in the numbers. Numbers were her native language, but they were a translation of something happening in the real world, and she needed to see the real-world version of what she was looking at. She told herself that was the reason. She did not examine the other possibility, which was that she had been alone in her apartment for 5 days and was not thinking clearly. She found a black dress in the back of her closet that she had worn once to a colleague's funeral and had not touched since. She called the gala's event line and gave them her name, and after a brief pause, the coordinator told her that a ticket had already been held in her name at the door, which was strange, which should have made her stop, which she filed under things to think about later, and that she should arrive no later than 8. She arrived at 8:47 because she spent 42 minutes standing outside her apartment building in the rain, convincing herself to take the cab that was already waiting at the curb. The Grand Meridian Ballroom occupied the entire 4th floor of a hotel that had been built in 1921 and renovated 5 times since, and it showed all 5 renovations simultaneously in a way that was architecturally coherent only if you didn't look at any 2 walls at the same time. It held 600 people with the ease of a room that had been designed for exactly this kind of excess. Circular tables draped in ivory linen, a small orchestra playing in one corner, a bar along the east wall where bartenders in white jackets moved with the practiced speed of people being paid very well to appear effortless. Evelyn checked her coat and stood at the entrance to the main room for approximately 3 seconds before her body's well-established instinct to flee became something she had to physically override. The noise hit her first. 600 people all performing the specific kind of relaxed confidence that only very powerful people or very good liars could sustain. And then the visual information arrived, and she processed it the way she processed everything, rapidly and in categories. Politicians. She recognized 4 state legislators, a borough president, 2 city council members. Law enforcement presence, 2 men near the east wall who had the posture and the alert stillness of security, not guests. Press. None that she could identify, which meant either it wasn't a press event or the press access had been very carefully managed. And then the people she couldn't categorize cleanly, the people in expensive suits who stood in clusters near the windows and spoke quietly and watched the room with the specific kind of attentiveness that was not social. It was operational. She took a glass of water from a passing tray and moved along the north wall toward the area near the stage, because the stage was where the event's formal presentation would happen, and the formal presentation was the reason she was here. The gala's program included what the invitation had described as a financial transparency report on the Voss Foundation's charitable activities, which, given what she now knew about where the foundation's funding actually came from, was a sentence that required some recalibration of the word transparency. She found a position near the stage right edge where she could see both the presentation screen and the room. She had her phone in her hand. She had photographed all 17 pages of her legal pad and the 6 most critical spreadsheet views before leaving the apartment, and she had loaded the most important of them into an encrypted folder on her phone. Not because she planned to use them tonight, she told herself, but because she thought better when she had her data nearby. The program started at 9:15. The foundation's executive director, a trim woman in her 50s named Margaret Hollis, who had the warmth of a person who had spent decades being paid to be warm at events like this, took the stage and began the presentation. Behind her, a large screen displayed charts and figures, donation totals, grant recipients, community programs funded, outcomes achieved. Evelyn listened with half of her attention and watched the room with the other half. She had not yet seen Damien Voss. She knew what he looked like from photographs, tall, dark-suited, with the kind of face that photographers apparently found naturally compelling, because every image she had found in news archives was somehow more composed than most people managed to look in posed portraits. In the photographs, he always looked like he was thinking about something else. Like whatever was happening in front of the camera was interesting, but not as interesting as the thing happening just outside the frame. She was still watching the room when she felt a shift in the quality of attention around the stage, a slight reorientation of the people standing nearby, the specific kind of subtle human magnetic field effect that occurred when someone important arrived somewhere. She turned. He was standing 15 feet away. The photographs had been accurate about the dimensions of him, the height, the dark suit, the quality of attention in his expression. What the photographs had not captured was the stillness. He was completely still in a room full of people performing movement and ease, and the stillness was not passive. It was deliberate. It was the stillness of a person who had decided a long time ago that the world could come to him. He was looking at the stage. Then, with the slow precision of someone who was not in the habit of being surprised, he turned and looked directly at her. She looked away first, immediately. Her face went warm and she turned back toward the presentation and took a breath and reminded herself that she was a professional who had testified in federal court and survived 9 hours of hostile cross-examination, and there was absolutely no reason to feel like she needed to disappear into the floor. On the stage, Margaret Hollis was moving to the second section of the presentation, the financial breakdown. Evelyn watched the numbers appear on the screen behind her, and then, because it was what she did, because her brain did it automatically, and without permission, she started reading them. The numbers were wrong. Not obviously wrong. Not wrong in a way that the 600 people in this room would notice, because the 600 people in this room were not looking for it. But wrong in the specific, careful way that someone had tried very hard to make look right, which was the most interesting kind of wrong, which was the kind of wrong that Evelyn had spent 12 years learning to identify. A discrepancy in the grant disbursement figures. $47,000 in 1/4 figures that didn't match the corresponding line in the annual totals. It was small. It was designed to be small. But it was there, and it was consistent with a pattern she recognized from the wire transfer records on the drive, specifically from the series of payments she hadn't been able to trace. Her hand moved before she thought about it. She had her phone out, she had her spreadsheet open. She was doing the mental arithmetic and cross-referencing it against the figures on the screen, and without quite deciding to, she had taken 3 steps toward the stage and was standing near the edge of the presentation table where a small laptop sat running the slideshow and a printed copy of the financial report lay beside it. She was not supposed to be this close to the stage. She knew she was not supposed to be this close to the stage. But the number was there. It was right there. And she needed to see the printed figures to confirm what her mental arithmetic was already telling her. She was leaning over the printed report when the waiter hit her. He came from her left, moving fast with a full tray of champagne glasses, and he didn't see her because she had materialized from the edge of the room into a space she wasn't supposed to occupy, and the collision knocked the tray sideways and sent 8 glasses and approximately 3 liters of champagne in a sweeping arc that caught the edge of the presentation table, the corner of the laptop, and the presentation screen's HDMI connection. The screen went dark, and then, because the laptop was now wet, and because the presentation application was connected to the venue's central audio system. What came up when the screen flickered back to life was not Margaret Hollis's carefully curated financial report. It was Evelyn's spreadsheet. Her phone had connected to the venue's Bluetooth display system, automatically, the way phones did in modern hotels if you weren't paying attention to your settings, which she had not been. And when the laptop rebooted, it had defaulted to the wireless display source. Her spreadsheet, the one with the 17-page analysis, the full ownership map, the wire transfer records, the cross-references, the column she had labeled in her own shorthand Voss Meridian, direct trace, filled the 8-foot presentation screen behind the stage in 4K resolution. It was up for 11 seconds before Margaret Hollis reached the laptop and pulled the cable. 11 seconds was long enough. The room had gone completely silent in the way that large rooms full of important people went silent when something happened that none of them knew how to process. The silence was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of recognition, of 600 people looking at something that named them, or named people they knew, or named things they had told themselves could not be named in rooms like this. Evelyn was standing at the edge of the stage with champagne on her dress and her phone in her hand, and she was looking at the floor because that was the only place that made sense to look. And when she finally forced herself to raise her head, she looked at the room, and the room looked back at her. And then she found the one face in the room she hadn't wanted to find. Damien Voss had not moved from where he had been standing. He was still 15 feet from the stage. He was still completely still. But the quality of his stillness had changed, the way the quality of a room changes when a door opens somewhere you can't see, a shift in pressure rather than temperature. And he was looking at her with an expression that she could not read at all, which was itself interesting, because Evelyn had spent 12 years reading faces for involuntary tells, and she was very good at it. There was nothing involuntary in his expression. He was choosing exactly what to show her, and what he had chosen to show her was nothing she could name, which told her something she wasn't sure she wanted to know. The security team was moving. She could see them from her peripheral vision. 2 men from near the east wall and 1 from the entrance, converging on her position with the efficient non-urgency of professionals who had been trained to do this without creating additional scenes. She gripped her phone. The spreadsheet was gone from the screen, but it existed on her phone, and it existed on the USB drive in the apartment, and it existed in the photographs on her phone, and it existed in her head, all 17 pages, every figure, every cross-reference, and none of that was going to disappear because 3 men in suits were moving toward her. She had 2 seconds to decide what to do. She was going to run. That was the honest answer. Every biological instinct she possessed was pointing unanimously in the direction of the nearest exit, and the rest of her life spent somewhere that Damien Voss did not know her name. She had already turned toward the exit, and then his voice crossed the distance between them, quiet enough that it didn't reach the room, but loud enough to reach her. And what he said was not what she expected him to say. He said, "Don't." Just that. One word, flat and direct, with no threat in it and no command, only a certainty that the word would be sufficient. She stopped. He was still looking at her. The security team had also stopped, 3 feet away on either side, reading him the way people who worked for him clearly learned to read him, waiting for the signal that he had not yet given. "Stay," he said, still quiet, still looking at her with that expression she couldn't name. "I want to know how you did that." The champagne was cold on her skin. The room was still not quite recovered to noise. Someone near the bar had laughed at something, nervously, and the orchestra had started playing again, which meant someone had decided that the safest thing was to act like it hadn't happened. But the acting wasn't working yet. The room was still too alert, too recalibrated. Evelyn looked at Damien Voss. She thought about the $4 million she hadn't been able to trace, the 9 payments over 3 years. The most recent one 6 weeks ago, directed to an account that had appeared nowhere in the legitimate financial records and nowhere in the illegitimate ones either. Someone inside his organization was stealing from him. She thought about the person who had put the USB drive in her mailbox. The handwriting pressed hard enough into the paper to leave indentations. "You know what to do with this." She thought about the 11 seconds the spreadsheet had been visible on that screen and which faces in the room had gone still in the specific way that faces went. Still when you saw something you thought was buried. She had come here to understand what was happening inside the numbers. She had just, accidentally and catastrophically, announced to every powerful person in this room that someone had been doing it, And the most dangerous person in the room was standing 15 feet away, asking her to stay. She was terrified. Her hands were shaking, and she was pressing her right thumbnail into her palm the way she did when she needed to not let that show. She stayed. They put her in a room, not a threatening room, a small conference space off the main corridor with a round table and 4 chairs and a water pitcher and glasses, the kind of room that hotels maintained for exactly this kind of private conversation. 2 of the security team stood outside the door. One stood inside near the window with his hands folded in front of him and his face set in the specific professional blankness of someone who was paid to be present without participating. She sat at the table and put her phone face down in front of her and tried to steady her breathing. She had been in the room for 6 minutes when the door opened. Damien Voss did not sit. He stood on the opposite side of the table from her, took off his jacket and draped it over the chair back, and looked at her for a moment with that same unreadable quality. "Water?" he said. "No." "You should drink something. You're in shock." "I'm not in shock. I have anxiety. Those present similarly, but they're not the same thing." Something shifted in his expression, slight, like something had surprised him, and he was deciding whether to let it. "Fair enough," he said. He poured himself a glass of water and sat down, not across from her but at the angle, the adjacent seat, which she recognized as a deliberate choice, not confrontational, not quite companionable, somewhere between the two. "How long have you been building that?" he said. 5 days. "From what?" "A package someone left in my mailbox." His expression didn't change. "Describe the package." "USB drive, no return address, handwritten note." He was quiet for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes, brief and carefully managed. "What did the note say?" "That I would know what to do with it." Another silence. He looked at his water glass, then at her. "And do you?" he said. "Know what to do with it?" "I know what I found in it." "That's not what I asked." She looked at him. The security man by the window had not moved. Outside the door, she could hear the muffled noise of the gala resuming its performance of normalcy. "Someone inside your organization is stealing from you," she said. "The payments are recent. 9 transfers, $4 million. Account I can't trace from the outside. Whoever sent me those files wanted me to find it, and they wanted it found in a way that was visible." She said the last word with a precision that acknowledged the full weight of what had just happened in that ballroom, and she watched his face to see what it did with the acknowledgement. He picked up his water glass, set it down without drinking. "The pattern," he said, "in the foundation's numbers. You saw it from the presentation." "In approximately 40 seconds, yes. Most people would have needed weeks. Most people aren't looking for it. You were." "I was." He looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that was trying to determine the weight and density of a thing, not just its surface. "What's your name?" he said. "You already know my name. You had me on your guest list." "I know the name on the invitation. I want to know if you're going to tell me yourself." It was a strange distinction. She considered it. "Evelyn Pierce," she said. What do you want, Evelyn Pierce?" She thought about all the careful, rational answers she had rehearsed in the cab on the way here. The plan she had constructed about what to say if she somehow ended up in exactly this conversation. The strategy. "I want to know who sent me that drive," she said, "and I want to know why they thought I was the safest person to send it to." His expression shifted again, just barely, just enough to tell her she had said something right. Not what he'd expected. Something true. He stood, put his jacket back on with the efficiency of someone who spent very little time on the physical performance of getting dressed. "Go home," he said. "Don't talk to anyone about what you found. Don't make copies outside your system." I know what you already did," he said. "Do it anyway. Don't contact law enforcement until I've had a chance to talk to you again." "That's not something I agreed to." "No," he said. "It's a request." She looked at him. The distinction mattered to him, she could tell. The choice to call it a request rather than something else, which told her something. Not enough, but something. 24 hours, she said. He looked at her for a moment longer, then he nodded, once. 24 hours, he said. He left. The security man by the window left with him. She sat alone in the small conference room with the water pitcher and her phone face down on the table and listened to the muffled orchestra playing something that sounded, from a distance, like something from a different era entirely. She turned her phone over, looked at the spreadsheet still open on the screen, the account she couldn't trace. 9 payments, $4 million. The most recent one 6 weeks ago, 24 hours. She was already calculating what she could find in 24 hours, which was the same as deciding she was going to try, which was the same as deciding she was going to let a man she had met 40 minutes ago ask her to wait, which was not the rational choice she had arrived here intending to make. She picked up her phone and walked out of the room, past the guests still performing their version of the night recovering, past the bar where the white-jacketed bartenders were moving with their practiced ease, past the coat check where a young woman handed her the ticket without being asked. In the cab home, the rain was still coming down. She pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched the lights of Midtown smear past, and told herself she was going to think very carefully about this. She was still thinking about the expression on his face when he'd said request, the fraction of a second between making the choice and executing it. The way a person looked when they were not entirely sure what they were going to do next. She recognized it, she realized, because it was the same way she felt. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered it. The voice on the other end was not Damien Voss, it was a woman, older, clipped, with a specific urgency that bypassed pleasantries entirely. Ms. Pierce, the woman said, "My name is not important. What is important is that you are being followed right now. The car 2 vehicles behind your cab has been behind you since you left the hotel. Do not go home. Do not go anywhere predictable. Do you understand me?" Evelyn turned to look out the rear window of the cab. There was a black sedan 2 cars back. It was the same sedan she had noticed parked across from the hotel entrance when she'd arrived. "Who are you?" Evelyn said. "Someone who sent you a package," the woman said, "and who is very worried about what happens in the next 24 hours. The cab slowed for a red light. The sedan slowed with it, 2 cars back. Patient. Professional. Evelyn looked at her phone, at the spreadsheet, at the 9 payments she couldn't trace and the $4 million, and the account that existed nowhere in either the legitimate or the illegitimate records. "Where should I go?" she said. The sedan kept its distance through 6 more blocks before Evelyn realized it wasn't trying to stop her. It was hurting her. Towards something she hadn't seen yet. The sedan followed her for 9 blocks before she told the cab driver to pull over. Not at her building, not anywhere predictable. She had him stop outside a 24-hour diner on Amsterdam Avenue that she had never been to before, paid cash, and was through the door before the cab had fully pulled back into traffic. She took a booth in the back with a clear sight line to the entrance and ordered coffee she didn't want from a waitress who looked like she had been awake for 20 hours and had made peace with it. The woman on the phone had hung up after one more sentence. "Stay somewhere public until I contact you again." Evelyn put her phone on the table and watched the street through the plate glass window. The sedan had not followed her into the turn. Either it hadn't seen her exit the cab, or it had decided that stopping was enough of a message in itself. She thought about both possibilities, and neither of them was comfortable. The coffee arrived. She wrapped her hands around the mug and tried to organize what she knew into something that had a shape. The forensic instinct, the part of her brain that had been doing this for 12 years, was already working, sorting the data into columns, even while the rest of her was still processing the image of 800 square feet of her most sensitive work displayed on a ballroom screen in front of half the city's power structure. What she knew: someone inside Damien Voss's organization had been moving $4 million through an account that didn't officially exist. That same someone, or someone who knew about it, had compiled evidence and sent it to her specifically. The woman who had just called her had identified herself as the sender. The sedan that had followed her from the hotel belonged to someone. Not Voss's people, she was fairly certain of that, because Voss's security team had been inside the building and they'd had her in a room and let her walk out, which meant if Voss wanted her followed, he had better options than a black sedan she could spot in the rain, which meant the sedan belonged to whoever was worried about what she'd found, which meant 2 parties knew about the drive, and they wanted different things from her. And she was currently sitting in a diner at 11:45 at night with champagne drying on her dress and her phone face up on a sticky table. And she had told a man she'd met 40 minutes ago that she would give him 24 hours. She took a sip of the coffee. It was terrible. She drank half of it anyway. Her phone buzzed. The same unknown number. There's a hotel 3 blocks north of you, the woman said. The Alderton. Room 412 is booked under the name Clara Webb. Key is at the front desk. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Who are you? Evelyn said again. Someone who's been watching Voss's books for 2 years and ran out of time to do it carefully. A pause. You saw the 9 payments? Yes. Did you trace the account? No. I couldn't get past the second layer encryption from outside. Another pause. This one felt different, tighter, like the woman on the other end was making a decision she'd been putting off. Come to the hotel, she said. Bring everything you built, all of it. The line went dead. Evelyn sat with the phone in her hand. Chart was probably on her legal pads right now, back in the apartment she wasn't going to tonight. The thought was so mundane against the texture of the last 3 hours that it produced a short, strange laugh she pressed behind her hand before the waitress could see it. She left cash on the table and walked 3 blocks north in the rain. Room 412 was a standard double with the curtains already drawn and a laptop open on the desk and 2 chairs pulled up to it like someone had been planning this meeting for longer than tonight. The woman already there when Evelyn knocked was not what she had expected from the voice. Mid-50s, small, with the kind of contained precision in her movements that reminded Evelyn of actuaries and cardiac surgeons, people whose entire professional identity was built around eliminating unnecessary variables. Her name, she said, was Nora Bast. She had been the Voss Foundation's internal auditor for 4 years before she wasn't. They let you go? Evelyn said. I resigned. Nora was already pulling up files on the laptop. 6 months ago. When I found the first of the 9 payments and realized that whoever was making them had access to clearance levels that only 3 people in the organization have. Voss being one of them. Voss being one of them, Nora confirmed. The other 2 are his operations director, a man named Carver, and his lieutenant, Victor Salazar. The name landed flatly in the room. Evelyn filed it. Why send the drive to me, she said. Why not federal authorities directly? Nora looked at her over the top of the laptop screen. Because I spent 6 months trying to determine whether the federal contact I had was clean, and I am not confident he is. And because your work on the merchant insurance fraud 3 years ago, specifically the way you isolated the ownership chain through 14 layers of shell entities, was documented in a case brief that a colleague of mine worked on. You're good at this, and you're not connected to any of the institutions that Voss has had 20 years to compromise. She paused. Also, you don't own property, which makes you harder to threaten through conventional means. Evelyn absorbed this. You researched me. Thoroughly. Before you sent the drive. Weeks before. She sat down in the second chair. The rain was audible against the window. Show me the account. Nora showed her the account. What it revealed, when Evelyn had the second layer of data to cross-reference against, was not what she had expected. The $4 million was not going out of Voss's organization. It was going in. From an external source moving through the untraceable account and then dispersing into several of the subsidiary entities she had already mapped. The money was being introduced into the Voss financial structure, not extracted from it. Someone's paying him, Evelyn said. Someone's paying someone, Nora said. The account that originates the payments is connected to a rival organization. Evelyn was already seeing it. Or law enforcement. Or both. She looked at the screen. This is a purchase. Someone is buying access to something inside Voss's operation. Or someone inside Voss's operation is selling it, Nora said quietly. They looked at each other. Victor Salazar, Evelyn said. That's my conclusion, but I need someone who can prove it from the financials alone without any physical evidence because I don't have physical evidence and I am not in a position to obtain it. Nora closed the laptop halfway. Voss doesn't know. I'm certain of that. If he knew, Salazar would already be dead. The bluntness of the last sentence sat in the room without apology. Then why was I being followed tonight? Evelyn said. After the gala. Nora's expression shifted. Something that was not quite fear, but was in the same family. Because Salazar's people were at the gala. 2 of them. And when your spreadsheet went up on that screen, they saw it. She closed the laptop the rest of the way. Which means Salazar knows someone has been looking at the money. He doesn't know who yet. But he will figure it out, and when he does, her phone buzzed on the desk. She looked at the screen. Something passed over her face that Evelyn couldn't name. "What?" Evelyn said. Nora picked up the phone and held it out. On the screen was a photograph taken from a distance, grainy, clearly a security feed. It showed the exterior of an apartment building on West 84th Street. Evelyn's building. 2 men were in the frame, standing near the front entrance, not moving, just standing. "How long ago was this taken?" Evelyn's voice came out flat. Professional. She was grateful for that. 8 minutes ago." She looked at the photograph for another moment. Then she put her phone on the table next to the laptop and looked at it. The encrypted folder, the spreadsheet, the 17 pages of work and cross-references, and the full ownership map that now had a shape she hadn't had 48 hours ago. "I need to call Voss," she said. Nora stared at her. "That is the opposite of what I brought you here to do." "I know." Evelyn looked at her. "But if Salazar already knows someone has the financial records, and he has people outside my apartment tonight, then the next 12 hours determine whether this evidence survives long enough to do anything with it. Voss has resources I don't have, and he asked me to give him 24 hours. He's a criminal. He's a criminal who doesn't know his closest lieutenant is selling him out," Evelyn said, "which means right now his interests and mine are pointed in the same direction." Nora was quiet for a long moment. Then, with the expression of a person who had run out of better options, "You don't have his number." "No," Evelyn said, "but I think he has mine." She picked up her phone, pulled up the contact she had screenshotted from the gala's event coordinator email before she'd left the apartment 5 hours ago. A direct line listed for event security, which she was fairly certain connected to someone in Voss's orbit, even if it didn't connect to him directly. She dialed. It rang twice. "You should have gone straight home." The voice was not security. It was him. Flat, alert, with the edge of something she couldn't fully identify. Not anger, not surprise, something colder than both. "I couldn't," she said. "Your building had a Bluetooth display system with default pairing enabled, which is a security failure that had nothing to do with me. And now I have 2 men outside my apartment and a woman sitting next to me who has been building the same financial case I have for 2 years and ran out of time." A silence. 3 seconds. 4. "Where are you?" "Somewhere that isn't my apartment." "Evelyn." The use of her name was not soft. It was precise, a nail going exactly where it was aimed. "Where are you?" She told him. "Don't move," he said. "I'm sending someone. 15 minutes. I want to talk to you directly." "You are talking to me directly." "In person," she said. "Tonight. I have information you need to hear before morning." Another silence. She could hear him breathing. She hadn't expected to be able to hear him breathing. He seemed like the kind of person who would have regulated even that, and it told her something about how calibrated the moment was for him. 15 minutes, he said again. "Then we'll talk." He came himself. That surprised her. She had expected a driver, a handler, the same 2 security men from the gala. Instead, it was Voss at the door of room 412, alone, with his jacket off and his tie loosened and an expression that was not the composed public mask she had watched across a ballroom. He looked at the laptop, at Nora, at Evelyn, and then back at the laptop with the particular assessment of someone doing triage. "You're Bast," he said to Nora. Not a question. Nora went very still. "You knew my name. I knew you resigned. I didn't know why until 40 minutes ago." He moved into the room, pulled the 3rd chair from against the wall, and sat down. "Open the account records." "Mr. Voss, open them." Nora opened the laptop. She pulled up the account. Evelyn watched his face as he read, and she was looking for the moment when recognition happened, the thing that confirmed what she and Nora had concluded. And when it came, it was not what she expected. It was not anger. It was a stillness so complete it was almost like watching someone stop existing temporarily. The light staying on, but everything else going somewhere internal she couldn't follow. Then he blinked. Once, and came back. "How long?" he said. His voice had changed, not louder, quieter, which was worse. "First payment is 31 months ago," Nora said. "Victor's been with me for 14 years. Nobody said anything. The rain against the window was the only sound for several seconds. "He has access to 3 clearance levels that could authorize these transfers," Evelyn said. "You're one of those 3. Based on the timing of the payments and the operational windows when the transfers occurred, I can build a pattern that eliminates the other two and points to— I know who it points to. He said it very quietly. I don't need the pattern. You'll need the pattern for a court, Evelyn said. He looked at her. Who said anything about a court? The air in the room changed. Evelyn looked back at him steadily. I did, just now, because that's what the evidence is for, not for whatever you're thinking right now. You don't know what I'm thinking. You've gone somewhere very quiet and your jaw is doing something specific that means you're deciding whether to make a phone call, she said. Don't make that phone call. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved in his expression, the same fractional shift she had seen at the gala when she had said something he hadn't expected. You read people, he said. I read numbers. People aren't that different. She leaned forward slightly. If you move on Salazar before I finish building the financial case, you lose the one weapon he can't defend against. The money doesn't lie. The money doesn't recant, and it doesn't get transferred to another district. Let me finish what I'm building. How long? 48 hours, maybe less. He was quiet. He looked at the laptop again, at the account records, at the line of 9 payments that represented 31 months of the person he had trusted most in the world selling him to whoever was buying. Where's the money going after it enters my accounts, he said. I don't know yet, Evelyn said. That's part of what I need the 48 hours for. If Salazar's people were at the gala tonight, then he knows someone is looking, she said, which means the window is closing. I know. That's why I called you. He stood, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. You're not going back to your apartment, he said. I'm aware of that. I have a building on the Upper East Side, secure, private. You'll have everything you need to work. I'm not your guest, she said. No. He looked at her. You're the only person in this city right now who has any reason to keep me from burning half of it down. So you're my problem. He looked at Nora. Both of you. Nora pressed her lips together. I've been running from this for 6 months, she said. I'm not interested in being managed by the man whose organization I've been documenting. You're interested in staying alive, he said. Not cruel, just direct. And you both know what happens if Salazar figures out who has this before we're ready. The silence that followed was not comfortable. It was the silence of two people who had run out of counter-arguments. Evelyn looked at the spreadsheet on her phone, at the 17 pages, at the account she had spent 5 days trying to trace and had finally cracked open in the last 2 hours with Nora's second layer of data. One condition, she said. Name it. I work independently. You don't look at what I'm building until I'm ready to show you, and when I'm done, the evidence goes to federal authorities. Not into your personal version of a resolution. He looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that was taking the full measure of something. And if what you find is worse than what you think, he said, then it goes to federal authorities anyway. Another long look, then, agreed. She didn't trust the agreement entirely. She could see that he knew she didn't trust it, and that he had noted this without being bothered by it, which told her something about how he operated. That he was comfortable making arrangements with people who watched him skeptically, which probably meant he had a great deal of experience being watched skeptically and had learned to work within it. She picked up her phone, picked up her jacket from the back of the chair. One more thing, she said. The woman from the sedan, who was following me from the hotel. He paused. The question had hit something. She could see it. The slight repositioning, the micro-adjustment in his expression that meant the information had weight he was managing. What sedan? He said. She looked at him. He looked back. He was lying. She was certain of it. Not about Salazar. About this. About the sedan. About whoever had been in it. About what they wanted from her. He was lying with the same control he applied to everything else. The complete external composure. And she filed it under things she did not yet have enough information to act on. Never mind, she said. He nodded once. Held the door. She walked past him into the corridor and felt the particular discomfort of a person who has just made a decision they cannot take back, stepping into a set of circumstances that will not hold still long enough to be fully analyzed before they require a response. Behind her, she heard him say something quietly to Nora. She didn't catch the words, but she heard Nora's answer, short and tight. If anything happens to either of us, copies go to 6 different locations automatically. I set that up 3 months ago. A pause. Then Voss's voice, quieter than she'd expected. Good. She walked toward the elevator, pressed the button, listened to the building's sounds. The hum of the heating system, the distant sound of a television through a wall, the rain outside still insisting on itself. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Not the same unknown number as before. A different one. She answered it. Silence on the other end for 2 seconds. Then a man's voice, smooth, unhurried, with the specific quality of someone who is used to being the most dangerous person in any conversation they chose to enter. Miss Pierce, the voice said, my name is Victor Salazar. I think you and I should have a conversation before you say anything else to Damien that you can't take back. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. She stood in front of them and did not get in. I know what you found, Salazar said. And I know you think you understand what it means. You don't. Not yet. But if you give me 20 minutes, just 20 minutes, Miss Pierce, I can show you something that will change everything you think you know about the man who just offered. She did not get into the elevator. The doors opened and she stood in front of them and let them close again, and the whole time Victor Salazar's voice was sitting in her ear with the patient confidence of a man who was not accustomed to being made to wait. Ms. Pierce, he said again, I can hear you breathing. I know you can, she said. I'm deciding something. Take your time. She turned. The corridor was empty. The door to room 412 was 20 feet behind her, closed. She could go back through it. She could walk back in and tell Voss that his lieutenant had just called her phone, a number that only Nora and Voss himself had been given in the last 40 minutes, which meant the leak was already inside the room she had just left, or the number had been obtained by other means she didn't want to think about yet. She could do that. 20 minutes, she said. There's a car outside the hotel's service entrance on 71st Street, Salazar said. It will take you somewhere private. You won't be harmed. You have my word on that. Your word doesn't carry the weight you think it does. A pause. Something shifted in his voice. Not anger, something more considered. Fair. Then let me offer you something more concrete. I know about Nora Bast. I know about the drive she built over 2 years, and I know that what she showed you tonight is accurate. The 9 payments, the account, all of it. Another pause, carefully timed. What she didn't show you is where the money was going before it entered my accounts. Because she doesn't know, but I do. Evelyn's hand tightened on the phone. The service entrance, she said. 5 minutes. She hung up. Stood in the corridor for 3 seconds. Then she walked back to room 412 and knocked twice. Voss opened it. He read her face immediately. She could see him doing it, the rapid calibration, and his expression sharpened. What happened? Salazar just called my phone, she said. He wants to meet. The silence that followed was very short and very dense. How did he get this number? Voss said. Not a question. The words came out flat and separate, like he was placing them down carefully to keep from doing something else with his hands. I don't know yet. He's offering information about where the payments originated before they entered your accounts. You're not going. I'm already going, she said. 5 minutes. Service entrance. She looked at him steadily. Don't follow me. Don't put anyone on me. If he sees surveillance, he'll disappear and we lose the only chance we have to hear what he's offering before he decides the offer is no longer necessary. Voss looked at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize. The one where he was running rapid calculations behind completely controlled eyes, and the calculation was coming up with an answer he didn't like. He'll try to turn you, Voss said. Whatever he shows you, whatever he tells you, he's going to try to make you doubt everything you've built. I know, she said. That's why I'm telling you where I'm going. She looked at him for one more moment. Then she turned and walked back down the corridor to the elevator. And this time she got in. Take. The car was a dark town car, unmarked, with a driver who didn't turn around when she got in through the service entrance door. They drove for 12 minutes in a direction she tracked by instinct, south and then east, crossing into a neighborhood where the buildings got older and the street lighting got sparse. They stopped outside a parking structure on a block she didn't recognize. The driver said nothing. A door to the stairwell opened from the inside. Victor Salazar was not what she had built in her head from the name and the financial records. She had constructed, without meaning to, a version of him assembled from the texture of his crimes, someone with the smoothness of long-practiced deception, Someone who looked like the kind of man who had been lying successfully for 31 months. He was shorter than Voss, darker, with a face that was not smooth at all. It was a face that had absorbed considerable weather over considerable years, with lines around the eyes that came from a specific kind of sustained alertness, the kind that didn't allow for real sleep. He was wearing a dark coat, and he was sitting on the hood of a parked car with his hands visible and his posture entirely unthreatening, which she noted as deliberate. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You said 20 minutes, she said. "Start." He looked at her for a moment, nodded once like she had confirmed something. "The payments into my accounts," he said. 31 months of them, $4 million. He reached into his coat pocket, slowly, and produced a phone which he held out screen first. "I didn't know about them for the first 14 months. Someone was using my clearance codes, access codes that Damien issued to me and that I never shared with anyone. The transfers were made in my name, through my access level, and I had no knowledge of them until I found the first discrepancy in month 15. Evelyn looked at the phone screen. Transaction records. A different view of the same account she had been looking at, but with metadata she hadn't had access to before. Timestamps, access log signatures. "These show the login signatures for each transfer," she said. "Yes, they're yours. They use my codes," he said. "There's a difference." He stood slowly and came to stand beside her so they were both looking at the screen, close enough that she could smell cigarette smoke and something chemical, not cologne, something industrial. Like he had been somewhere before this that involved different air. "Look at the timestamp on transfer 6, then look at where my access codes were used in the main operational system 12 minutes before that same timestamp." She looked. Transfer 6? 8 months ago, approximately $500,000. And 12 minutes before, the same access codes had been used to log into the main operational system from a different location. 2 different locations, 12 minutes apart. Physically impossible for one person. "Someone cloned your access codes," she said. "Someone who had access to the system at the administrative level," Salazar said. "Someone who could issue codes and revoke them and modify them. Someone who has been running this operation inside Damien's organization for over 2 years and has been doing it specifically in a way that points back to me." She lowered the phone slowly. Her mind was already running the implications forward, the same way it ran numbers forward, following the chain of logic to its conclusion before she was ready to say it out loud. "You're telling me Damien Voss is framing you," she said. "I'm telling you the evidence points there," Salazar said. "I'm not telling you what to conclude. I'm a man who has been Damien's lieutenant for 14 years, and I have spent the last 17 months trying to figure out who inside the organization had both the access level and the motive to do this. And every time I run the trace, it ends in the same place." "Administrative access to the code issuance system," she said. "That's Voss." "That's Voss," he confirmed. The parking structure was cold. She could see her breath. She was pressing her thumbnail into her palm and making herself stop, and then doing it again without noticing. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "You could have let me build the case against you. You could have disappeared. Because Nora Bast is going to finish what she started and someone is going to jail for what's in those records," he said. "And it's going to be me, because the records are designed to point at me. And the only person who can unravel the design is someone who can see the architecture clearly enough to recognize it was built to be found." He looked at her. "You found it in 5 days. No one else has come close in 17 months. She was quiet for a long moment. The logic was internally consistent. The metadata was real. She could see that. She knew how to read access logs, and what she was looking at on that screen was not fabricated. 2 physical locations, 12 minutes, 1 set of codes. It was real. It was also exactly the kind of thing that a man who had spent 31 months building a sophisticated financial deception would construct as a counter-narrative for the moment the deception was discovered. "I need the raw access logs," she said. "All of them. Not just the 6 transfers you've selected to show me." Something moved in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or something that looked like it. "They're on a server I can give you access to," he said. "But not tonight. Tonight I need to know if you're going to take what you've built to Damien before I can show you the rest." I told him 24 hours. "Then I have less time than I thought." He put the phone back in his coat. "Miss Pierce, I've known Damien Voss for 14 years. I know what he does with people who become problems. Nora Bast resigned 6 months ago. Did she tell you what happened to the auditor who was in her position before her? Evelyn said nothing. His name was Thomas Riley, Salazar said. He resigned 4 years ago. They found him in the river off Greenpoint 8 months after that. He paused. The official finding was accidental drowning. Damien sent flowers to the memorial. She held the information without reacting to it, filed it, added it to the column marked Verify Independently, urgently. I'll be in touch about the server access, Salazar said. In the meantime, be careful what you show Damien Voss and when. The driver appeared from the stairwell door. The meeting was over. She rode back to the hotel in silence, in the dark, pressing her thumbnail into her palm and staring at the city moving past the window and trying to hold two directly contradictory versions of the same financial architecture in her head simultaneously, without collapsing either one prematurely. Nora was alone in room 412 when Evelyn got back. Voss was gone. He left 10 minutes after you did, Nora said. She was at the laptop, and her posture had the rigid quality of someone who had been sitting very still for a while because movement felt dangerous. He got a phone call and left. He said to tell you... She stopped. What? He said to tell you the 24 hours still stands. Evelyn sat down, looked at the laptop. Nora, the auditor before you, Thomas Riley. Nora went very still. You knew him, Evelyn said. He was my predecessor. Her voice had gone flat in a specific way, the flatness of someone managing something they had already managed many times before and had not gotten easier. He resigned. 8 months later, he was found in the river. Salazar just told me that. Nora looked at her. Something shifted in her expression. Not surprise, something more complicated. Salazar told you that Voss killed him, Nora said. He implied it. Thomas Riley was killed by 2 men connected to a rival syndicate, Nora said carefully. I believe that. The evidence points there, but... She stopped. Her hands were flat on the table. But I could never fully eliminate the alternative, and I have spent 6 months not fully eliminating it. Why didn't you tell me this before I went to Voss? Because the financial evidence against Salazar is real, Nora said. The payments are real. The account is real. Whatever Salazar told you tonight, the access logs show 2 locations, 12 minutes apart, Evelyn said. Same codes. Physical impossibility for one person. Nora went quiet. You've seen that, Evelyn said. You've seen that data. I've seen data that could be interpreted that way, Nora said slowly. I chose to weight the payment evidence more heavily because the payment evidence is more comprehensive. Or because you'd already committed to the conclusion and you weighted the evidence accordingly, Evelyn said. The words landed hard. She hadn't meant them to be cruel. They were just accurate, and accuracy sometimes landed that way. Nora closed her eyes briefly. Yes, she said. That's possible. Evelyn put her phone on the table, pulled up her spreadsheet, sat with both versions of the architecture in front of her, Salazar as perpetrator, Voss as perpetrator, and began running the numbers forward again from the beginning. She worked for 2 hours without speaking. At 3:40 in the morning, she found it. It was not in the payment records. It was not in the access logs. It was in the subsidiary structure of one of the 47 shell companies she had mapped in the first 2 days. A company called Meridian Shield Consulting LLC, incorporated in Delaware, which appeared in the ownership chain as a passive holding entity. She had looked at it on day 2 and moved on because it had looked inactive. It wasn't inactive. It was the quietest thing in the entire structure, which was exactly why it had taken her until now. Meridian Shield Consulting LLC had a single active contract executed 14 months ago with a federal agency. She stared at the filing number on her screen. She cross-referenced it against the public contracting database. The contract was listed as a consulting agreement for financial analysis services. The contracting agency was the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Her chest had gone very cold. She looked at the filing, at the date, at the contract value. Nominal, just large enough to be real, small enough not to draw attention. At the authorized signatory on the contracting agency's side, which was a signature block she recognized from having read approximately 400 pages of federal contracting documents over the past 12 years. She knew that signature block. She had seen it on documents from the second of the 3 FBI investigations into Voss. The investigation that had collapsed 18 months ago. The one where the assistant U.S. attorney had been transferred to another district. The authorized contracting officer was not an FBI financial analyst. It was a name she had seen in the wire transfer records 3 days ago, in a context she had filed as political corruption secondary thread, returned to later. She returned to it now. The name appeared in 4 places. As a recipient of political donations from Voss-connected entities, as a member of a federal oversight committee that had jurisdiction over 2 of the investigations, as the authorized contracting officer for Meridian Shield Consulting's federal contract, and she pulled the last cross-reference now, the one that took her 4 minutes to locate in a state and corporation database, as a silent co-owner of Meridian Shield Consulting LLC itself. The same entity that had just connected Voss's financial structure to the FBI. She sat back in her chair. Both versions were true. That was what the data was telling her. Salazar was taking money from an external source. The access log anomaly was real, yes, but so were the payments, and the 2 facts were not mutually exclusive. Salazar had been running his own operation alongside Voss's, and so had Voss, and somewhere in the intersection of those 2 operations was a federal official who was compromised by both of them and had been managing both relationships simultaneously for over a year. The drive had not been sent to her to expose Salazar. The drive had been sent to her to expose this, the whole architecture, all of it. She looked at Nora. Who else has seen the Meridian Shield filing? Nora frowned. I never found a Meridian Shield. Because it looked inactive, Evelyn said. It's not. It has a federal contract. I need you to look at this and tell me if I'm reading it right. Nora came around the table and looked at the screen. Read for 30 seconds. Went still. That signature block, Nora said quietly. I know. I know. Nora straightened, put her hand over her mouth briefly, then lowered it. If this is what it looks like, she said, then neither of us is safe. Not from Salazar. Not from... She stopped. Not from anyone. Evelyn looked at her phone, at the 24-hour agreement, at the encrypted folder, at the 3 copies she had made of the drive distributed to 3 locations, with instructions to release the files automatically if she missed a check-in. She opened a new message on her phone, typed a name, stopped. The name she had just typed was Damien Voss. The name she needed to tell this to was Damien Voss. The man who she still could not fully eliminate, have had a connection to Thomas Riley's death. The man who had said agreed when she had told him the evidence would go to federal authorities, and who she had noted said it with the ease of someone who had calculated what the word was worth in that moment. The man who had run a criminal empire for 15 years and had never once been brought to account for it. The man whose face she kept returning to when she tried to think about who had sent her the drive. Because the drive had been sent by someone who was afraid. The handwriting proved it, pressed hard, controlled, angry at the paper. And whoever had sent it had known enough about Evelyn's work to trust her specifically. Nora had sent the drive, Nora had said, but Nora had access to the financial records only because she had been inside the organization, and the one person who could have authorized Nora's access level in the first place. Evelyn's phone lit up. A message. No sender name, a number she hadn't seen before. They found one of your copies. The one at your office. They're moving now. Get out of the hotel. She was on her feet before she finished reading it. Nora, we have to go. Now. Nora looked up, saw Evelyn's face, and didn't ask questions. She grabbed the laptop. Evelyn grabbed her phone and jacket. They were in the corridor when the elevator at the far end opened. 2 men, neither of them Voss, neither of them anyone she recognized. Moving with the specific economy of people who had been told exactly where to go and what to do when they got there. She grabbed Nora's arm and turned toward the stairwell. Behind them, she heard one of the men say, flatly, into a phone, "They're running." They hit the stairwell door at the same moment her phone rang. She answered it running, one hand on the railing, Nora 1 step behind her. It was Voss. His voice was tight in a way she hadn't heard before. Not loud, but compressed. The way a room sounded right before the pressure differential broke something. "Which floor?" he said. 4, stairwell. Keep going down. There's a door at sublevel 1 that opens to the parking structure. My car is there. A pause. Half a second, which from him felt long. I found something in the last hour, something you need to see. What? Not on the phone. His voice dropped further. Evelyn, I need you to trust me for the next 10 minutes. She was running downstairs in a hotel at 4 in the morning with 2 men behind her and a federal official's signature on a contract that connected the FBI to a criminal empire, and she was being asked to trust the man at the center of it. She ran. 10 minutes, she said. They hit sublevel 1. The door opened into dim parking garage light and the smell of exhaust and concrete. A black car at the far end, engine running, headlights off. She was halfway across the garage when Nora suddenly stopped. Evelyn turned. Nora was standing 6 feet behind her with her laptop held against her chest, and her face doing something Evelyn didn't understand. A strange, fixed quality, not fear, something that had moved past fear into a place that looked almost like Nora's face had gone somewhere Evelyn didn't recognize. Not fear, past fear. The fixed, glassy quality of a person who had already decided something and was standing at the edge of executing it, and the decision was not the one Evelyn had assumed they shared. Nora? Evelyn said. Nora's eyes moved to the black car at the far end of the garage, then back to Evelyn. Her grip on the laptop shifted, subtle, tighter, the way someone held something they were not planning to hand over. I can't go with you, Nora said. The garage was cold. The car's engine idled somewhere behind Evelyn. Above them, in the stairwell, she could hear the door opening. The 2 men from the corridor, 1 flight up, moving fast. Nora, we don't have time. I know. Her voice had gone very flat. Not the flat of calm, the flat of someone holding something down with both hands. The federal contract, Meridian Shield, the signature block. She stopped, swallowed. I knew about it. I've known for 4 months. The garage sounds came in sharp and specific. The engine, the footsteps above, the distant sound of the city's early morning traffic filtering through the concrete. You knew, Evelyn said. I couldn't include it in the files I sent you. If I had, it would have exposed my contact, the federal contact I told you I wasn't sure I could trust. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed it back down. Because my contact is the person on the other side of that contract. He's been feeding me information from inside the FBI for 2 years. He's compromised. I knew he was compromised. I used him anyway because I needed the inside access, and I told myself that what he was doing with Voss was... She stopped. I told myself it was complicated. It's not complicated, Evelyn said. He's a federal official taking money from a criminal organization. I know what he is, Nora said. He's also the only reason I'm still alive. 3 times in the past 6 months, someone from Salazar's operation got close to finding me, and 3 times I got a phone call in time to move. That was him. That was my contact. Above them, the stairwell door banged open. 1 flight up. 30 seconds. Nora! Evelyn took 2 steps toward her. We finish this together or the evidence disappears. You know that. If I come with you, I have to give up the one person who has kept me breathing. Her voice had gone raw now. The control was eroding, and what was underneath it was not weakness. It was the particular exhaustion of someone who had been making impossible calculations for 6 months and had finally run out of the energy to sustain them. I can't do that. You already did it, Evelyn said, the moment you put that drive in my mailbox. Nora looked at her. Her eyes were wet and her jaw was set, and she was pressing the laptop against her chest like a physical anchor. 20 seconds. The car, Evelyn said. Now. Something broke in Nora's expression. Not collapsed. Broke. The specific way that a decision breaks when someone finally stops fighting it. She moved. Both of them running across the garage floor, footsteps loud on the concrete. The black car's rear door opening from inside as they reached it, and Evelyn shoved Nora through and threw herself in after, and the car was moving before the door closed. Behind them, the stairwell door to sublevel 1 opened. She heard it, didn't look back. Felt the car accelerate through the garage toward the exit ramp. Voss was in the front passenger seat. He didn't turn around. His posture was rigid in the specific way that meant something had happened in the time since she'd last spoken to him that had reorganized his internal architecture. Drive, he said to the driver. And then, to Evelyn, still without turning, Are you hurt? No. Fast. I'm here, Nora said. Her voice was almost steady. The car came up the ramp and turned into the street. The city at 4:15 in the morning was its own specific version of itself. Delivery trucks, cab drivers, the occasional pedestrian who belonged to the night economy, all of it moving with the unhurried logic of a city that never fully stopped. You said you found something, Evelyn said. Voss turned then, and the quality of his face in the passing streetlight was the thing she had been waiting to see and had been hoping not to. The thing behind the control, the thing that only emerged when the control had been genuinely tested. His jaw was tight. His eyes had a darkness in them that was not metaphorical. Victor, he said. What about him? He's been moving people tonight. Quiet movements. Off the books, off the usual channels. I have 6 locations where his people were active in the last 4 hours that have no operational justification. He paused. One of them was your office building. I know, I got a message. The message came from me, Voss said. I put someone on your copies as soon as you told me about them. They got to the office location before Victor's team did. A pause. The other 2 copies are still secure. Evelyn absorbed this. You put someone on my copies. I made you a promise about the evidence. I was protecting the evidence. She looked at him. The distinction he was drawing, protecting the evidence, not controlling it, was real, she thought. Or it was the most sophisticated version of control she had encountered, which amounted to the same thing in terms of what she could prove. There's something else, he said. She waited. The Meridian Shield contract, the federal official. He said it flat, without inflection, and the flatness was its own kind of information. His name is Deputy Director Alan Marsh. He has been a contact of mine for 9 years. I paid for access to early warning on federal investigations. He ran it as a consulting arrangement, obscured through the Meridian Shield entity. His eyes held hers. I did not know he was also running the same arrangement with Victor. I did not know Victor had found him and turned him into a parallel channel. I found out 40 minutes ago. The car moved through the empty streets. Nobody spoke for a moment. So Marsh is compromised by both of you, Evelyn said. Was, Voss said. Victor used Marsh to route the payments into my organization through my own subsidiary structure, which means Victor found my arrangement with Marsh and used it as a tunnel. The payments look like they came from inside my operation when they actually moved through Marsh's contracting entity first. He stopped. His hand on the door handle was pressing hard enough that the knuckles had gone white, which was the first purely involuntary physical tell she had seen from him. Victor has been building a case against me inside my own financial structure for 2.5 years. Not just stealing, building. Brick by brick, payment by payment, a complete fraudulent record that when it lands in front of federal authorities will look like I have been running an unauthorized operation in my own organization that I tried to bury. Evelyn was very still. He's not just betraying you, she said. He's replacing you. He hands the FBI a case against you. You're removed, and he inherits the organization with clean hands because he was the one who exposed it. With Marsh's help to manage the federal side. Voss's voice was quiet in a way that was very different from his usual quiet. This quiet had weight and heat in it, like a room that had been sealed for too long. 14 years. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wasn't inadequate. Where is Salazar now? Nora asked from beside Evelyn. Moving, Voss said, which means he knows that whatever window he had is closing. When I stopped responding to operational check-ins 2 hours ago, he would have understood that I was outside his visibility. He looked at Evelyn. He called you. He made his case. The access log anomaly is real, Voss said. I know. He used Marsh's system access to clone his own codes and create the discrepancy. It was a contingency. If the payments were ever discovered, the log evidence would suggest a setup. He built his defense into the offense. A short, humorless exhale. He always was thorough. The car slowed. Evelyn looked out the window and didn't recognize the street. Industrial, waterfront adjacent, with the smell of the harbor coming through the car's ventilation. Where are we going? She said. Somewhere Victor doesn't know about, Voss said. We have maybe 3 hours before his next move. The financial evidence, all of it, Everything you have, including the Meridian Shield material, needs to be complete and in a transmittable package before that window closes. I need 4 hours minimum. You have 3, he said. Not harsh, just factual in the way that a deadline was factual. She pulled out her phone, opened the spreadsheet, looked at Nora. I need the full access logs, everything Salazar showed me and everything you have, combined against what I built. Nora opened the laptop. I'm ready. They worked in the back of the moving car, in the dark, with the city outside the windows and the harbor smell coming through the vents, and Evelyn didn't look up for 40 minutes. The building was a converted warehouse 2 blocks from the water, accessed through a loading dock entrance, and a freight elevator that opened onto a floor that had been fitted with the specific combination of high-end communication equipment and deliberately sparse furniture that indicated a space designed for operational use rather than habitation. 3 men were already there, Voss's people, not security-shaped, more the particular alertness of individuals who were used to being in rooms where important decisions were being made and whose job was to ensure those decisions could be executed. Evelyn sat up at a table by the windows, Nora beside her. Voss stood at the far end of the room, on the phone, speaking quietly in a way she wasn't meant to hear and made no effort to. The financial architecture was taking its final shape on her screen. The full picture, Voss's legitimate empire, his illegitimate one, Salazar's parallel operation tunneled through Marsh, the federal contract entity, the 9 payments rerouted through enough layers to look like internal fraud, but structured with the specific signatures of external construction. She could see it now, the way she saw everything when she had enough data, not as a collection of individual transactions, but as a single integrated design, a thing that someone had built with intention and care and time. It was, she thought, despite everything, a remarkable piece of financial architecture, cruel and precise and thorough. She started pulling it apart. 2 hours and 20 minutes. That was what she had. She set a timer on her phone and worked. Nora fed her the access logs in segments. She cross-referenced. She built the comparative timeline, Salazar's code usage against the physical location data, against the payment timestamps, against the Meridian Shield contract execution dates. She found 3 additional data points she hadn't had before. A subsidiary registration that Salazar had created inside Voss's structure using administrative credentials, a transfer of intellectual property rights that moved a significant asset out of the legitimate business holdings and into a holding entity that Salazar controlled, and Voir, the one that made her stop breathing for 3 full seconds, a communication routing record that showed 11 months of encrypted operational messages moving between Salazar's personal system and an external server registered to a company that she cross-referenced in 20 seconds against the FBI field office's public contractor database. Salazar had a direct line to someone in the FBI field office that was not Alan Marsh. A second contact, someone she didn't have a name for yet, someone who had been receiving operational intelligence from inside Voss's organization for 11 months. She stared at the routing record. Behind her, she heard Voss end his call, heard his footsteps approach. She turned the laptop toward him without speaking and let him read it. He stood very still for a long moment. He has a second federal contact, she said. Yes. Do you know who? I have a name, Voss said. I've had it for 30 minutes. That's what I was confirming on the phone. He looked at her. It doesn't change the priority. It means the package needs to go simultaneously to the federal prosecutor's office and to the inspector general's office, not to the field office directly, because the field office is compromised at 2 points now. I know where it needs to go, she said. I need 40 more minutes. He nodded, stepped back. She turned back to the screen. 38 minutes later, the package was done. Not done in the sense of complete. It was as complete as it was going to get in the time she'd had, which was complete enough. The full ownership map, the payment architecture dismantled layer by layer, the Meridian Shield contracts and the dual compromise of Marsh, the access log analysis demonstrating the code cloning, the subsidiary registration and asset transfer Salazar had embedded in the legitimate structure, the communication routing records and the second federal contact, cross-referenced, time-stamped, annotated with the specific financial forensic notation that federal prosecutors' offices recognized as valid evidentiary documentation. 73 pages. She pressed her thumbnail into her palm and looked at it on the screen. It's done, she said. Voss was there immediately. He looked at the screen for 30 seconds, reading fast. Then he looked at her. "This is enough," he said. "It's enough for the financial fraud charges," she said. "The rest depends on what physical evidence." The windows exploded inward. Not all of them. 2 on the north face of the building, the ones closest to the loading dock entrance, hit simultaneously by something that wasn't gunfire but was percussive, concussive, the specific blast pressure of a breaching charge applied to an external wall. The lights went out. Emergency lighting came on red and dim from strips at floor level, and in the confused, violent second that followed, Evelyn was on the floor. She didn't decide to go to the floor. Her body made that decision independently. And she could hear shouting from 2 directions, male voices in the tactical short form that meant trained people moving through a space, and she could hear Voss's men responding, and she could hear something else, something lower and more immediate. Nora, 3 feet away in the dark, not making a sound but breathing in the fast, shallow way that meant she was hurt. Evelyn crawled to her. "Where?" "Shoulder," Nora said through her teeth. "Something, debris." "I'm okay. The laptop, I have it." Evelyn had grabbed it when she went to the floor, pure reflex. It was under her left arm, and its screen was cracked but still lit. The package was still open, still there. "Can you move?" "Yes." The room was chaos in the specific organized way of a professional breach. Controlled aggression, not panic. She could hear Voss somewhere to her right, his voice sharp and low, directing his people. She could hear the positions of the entry team by their movement, north wall and east corridor, which meant the freight elevator and the loading dock had been compromised simultaneously, which meant they had come in from both sides. She pressed her back against the table and looked at the cracked laptop screen. The package. 73 pages. 3 hours of work in a race against a closing window. She needed to send it, right now, before anything else happened to the room or the people in it or the device in her hands. She opened the transmission, pulled up the 2 addresses she had confirmed with Voss, the federal prosecutor's office, the inspector general. Added 2 more she had decided on independently in the last hour. A federal judge she had worked with twice on fraud cases, clean record, no connections to anything in these files, and a journalist at a publication whose financial crime coverage she had read for 10 years and whose sourcing protocols she trusted. 4 recipients. The full 73-page package. Encrypted transmission through a relay she had set up on her personal server 18 months ago for exactly this kind of situation. She had set it up after the merchant insurance case when a witness had been intimidated into recanting, a contingency she had hoped never to use. Her thumb was on the send button, a hand closed on her wrist. Not Nora. The grip was hard and purposeful, and she looked up into a face she hadn't seen before. One of the entry team, close enough that she could see the sweat on his forehead and the focused blankness of someone executing a specific instruction. And the instruction was clearly about the laptop because his other hand was reaching for it. She didn't think. She sent the package and slammed the laptop shut simultaneously, the screen going dark, and drove her elbow into the man's forearm with everything she had. It surprised him. That was all. Just surprised him. She wasn't built for this. She knew that. But surprised was enough that his grip loosened for 2 seconds, and she pulled her wrist free and scrambled to her feet, and the room was full of noise and red light and movement, and someone was shouting Voss's name, and she ran toward the voice. She hit something solid and warm, and the instinct was to pull back, but hands caught her. Both arms, firm, and she heard Voss say, "It's me," and she stopped fighting. "Did you send it?" he said. His mouth was close to her ear. The noise level in the room meant he had to be. "Yes." 4 recipients. She felt something change in him. Not relief. Something harder than relief. Something that had been coiled for a long time releasing. "Good," he said. "Stay close." The breach team was moving toward their position. She could hear it, the organized sweep pattern, the footfalls placing themselves with precision. There were more of them than she'd estimated from the initial sounds, and the voices had changed. Not the tactical short form anymore. Someone was giving directions in a different register, calm and specific. The voice of the person running the operation rather than executing it. She recognized the voice. She had heard it once before, on a phone call in a hotel corridor, offering her 20 minutes that had reorganized everything she thought she knew. Victor Salazar had come himself. The red emergency light caught his face as he stepped into the section of the room where they were standing. Coat off, shirt dark with rain, with the flat operational focus of a man who had crossed over from planning into execution and found the transition clarifying. Behind him, 3 members of his team fanned out to positions. He looked at Evelyn, then at the closed laptop under her arm. "Too late," she said. Something moved in his expression, fast, controlled, managed back down. "Who did you send it to?" he said. "Enough people." He looked at Voss. The 2 men looked at each other across the red-lit space, and what moved between them was not the energy of strangers or enemies. It was something older and more specific, the energy of 2 people who had shared a history long enough that the betrayal of it had a different weight than ordinary betrayal. Evelyn could feel the density of it from where she was standing. "Victor," Voss said, "just the name." Quiet. Salazar looked at him for a long moment. His jaw moved slightly, some internal calculation running behind his eyes. "You should have seen it coming," Salazar said. "You taught me how to build something that lasted. I built something that lasted." "You built it inside what I built," Voss said. "That's how you survive," Salazar said. "You find the structure that already exists and you grow inside it until it can't contain you anymore." He paused. "I learned that from you." The room was very still for 3 seconds. Then Voss moved. He moved fast, faster than she expected from a man who operated at his particular frequency of controlled stillness, and the space between them collapsed, and Salazar's team moved at the same moment, and the room became violent in the sudden total way that rooms became violent when everyone in them had been ready for it and only waiting for the signal. Evelyn dropped to the floor, pulled Nora down. The laptop was still under her arm, and she was holding it with a grip that was going to leave bruises, and she was pressing herself against the base of the overturned table, and the sounds above her were close and specific. Impact, movement, breath forced out of a body, something breaking. And she was thinking with the part of her brain that didn't stop thinking about the transmission, about whether the relay had confirmed delivery before the screen went dark, about whether 4 recipients was enough, or whether she should have added a 5th. And she was pressing her thumbnail into her palm and counting seconds, and the count was at 47 when the room began to change. Not quiet. It didn't go quiet. But the quality of the sound shifted. From mutual combat to something more directed, more singular, the sound of a confrontation collapsing into its final shape. She raised her head above the table edge. Voss had Salazar against the north wall. One forearm across his chest, the other hand. She couldn't see what the other hand held. Salazar's team had been neutralized. She could see 2 of them down, one against the wall with Voss's man on him, one who had apparently made a decision about where this was going and had moved toward the freight elevator. Salazar's face was bloody. He was breathing hard, his chest working against the arm holding him, and his eyes were going between Voss's face and something across the room that Evelyn couldn't immediately identify. She followed his eyes. Nora. Salazar was looking at Nora with an expression that wasn't operational anymore. It was something rawer and more personal, and Nora was looking back at him with an expression that matched it in texture, if not in content. And Evelyn understood, in the specific cold way she understood things when data rearranged itself into a configuration she hadn't anticipated, that Nora Bass's federal contact, the person she had protected from the Meridian Shield disclosure, the person who had called her 3 times in 6 months to tell her to move before Salazar's people found her, was not Alan Marsh. It was Victor Salazar. Nora had been running both sides of this for 6 months, feeding Evelyn the financial evidence against Salazar while Salazar kept Nora alive. A mutual arrangement between 2 people who were supposed to be on opposite ends of the same case. The laptop was still under Evelyn's arm. 73 pages, transmitted to 4 recipients, containing evidence that implicated Salazar, Marsh, and the second federal contact. Evidence that Evelyn had built from records that Nora had provided. Evidence that Nora had shaped, she now understood, by what she had included and what she had held back, by how she had weighted the access log anomaly against the payment records, by the specific 2-year timeline of a case built to be believable into. The understanding arrived the way most true things arrived, not as a revelation, but as a confirmation of something she had already known somewhere below the level of conscious thought, something she had been refusing to look at directly, because looking at it directly would require her to act on it. Nora Bast had built the case against Victor Salazar, and Victor Salazar had kept Nora Bast alive while she built it. Evelyn stayed on her knees behind the overturned table with the cracked laptop under her arm, and she let the two facts sit together in her mind without immediately trying to resolve them into something clean, because they were not clean, and forcing them into a clean shape would make her miss whatever was actually true. Voss had Salazar against the wall. His forearm was still across Salazar's chest. His face was turned slightly toward Evelyn. He had caught whatever had happened in her expression in the moment she understood, the same way he caught everything, with that complete attention that she had stopped finding unsettling about a day ago. He was waiting. "Nora," Evelyn said. Her voice came out level. She was grateful for that. Nora was still on the floor beside her. She hadn't moved since Evelyn pulled her down. Her shoulder was bleeding through her jacket. Not badly, the debris wound was real. And she was looking at Salazar with the expression Evelyn now understood, the one that wasn't fear and wasn't strategy, the one that was what happened to a person's face when they were looking at a decision they had made a long time ago and were finally having to account for. "How much of what you gave me is real?" Evelyn said. Nora looked at her. "All of it." "How much of it is complete?" A pause. 3 seconds. The room around them was settling into a different kind of quiet. Voss's men had the remaining members of Salazar's team contained, and the immediate violence had exhausted itself. And what was left was the specific dense silence of a space where important things were about to be said. "The payment records are complete," Nora said. "The ownership structure is complete. The Meridian Shield contracts are complete." She stopped. "The access log anomaly. I included it because it was real. The code cloning is real. Victor did not make those transfers." "But you believed he built the overall operation," Evelyn said. "The parallel structure, the asset transfers, the subsidiary registration." "Yes." "Did he?" Nora's jaw worked. Her eyes went to Salazar again, briefly, and came back. "Yes," she said. "He did. All of it. The financial architecture I built the case from. Victor constructed it. The code cloning was his contingency, his exit strategy if it was ever discovered. But the operation itself, the parallel structure, the 14 months of feeding intelligence to his federal contacts, the plan to frame Damien and inherit the organization." She stopped. "All Victor." "Then why protect him?" Evelyn said. "From the disclosure. The second federal contact, the communication routing records. You knew that was him." Nora was quiet for a moment that stretched. "Because he called me 11 months ago," she said finally. "Before I sent you the drive. He told me he knew what I'd been building. He told me he could make it disappear and make me disappear with it." "Mambo." Her voice had gone very flat. "And then he told me he didn't want to. He told me—" She stopped again. The control was eroding in a different way now, not toward tears, toward something more fundamental. The erosion of the narrative a person built around their own choices when the narrative could no longer hold. "He told me he was tired, that he'd been doing this for 14 years and he wanted out and he needed the case against him to go away. He offered me protection in exchange for not removing his name, just not foregrounding it, building the case around the financial architecture and letting the federal contacts take the weight. He wanted to survive the investigation," Evelyn said. "He wanted to disappear from it." "Yes." Evelyn looked at Salazar. He was still against the wall, Voss's arm still holding him, but he was looking at Nora with an expression that was not the operational blankness she had seen in the parking garage. It was something that had more cost in it, more weight. "You were going to let me send that package," Evelyn said to Nora, "with his routing records in it." "I was going to tell you," Nora said, "in the car, after we were out. I was going to tell you everything and let you decide what to do with the routing records before transmission. You ran out of time." "We all ran out of time," Nora said quietly. Evelyn looked at the cracked laptop screen. The transmission had gone. 4 recipients. The full 73 pages, including the communication routing records that pointed to Salazar's second federal contact, which Evelyn had added herself from her own cross-referencing without Nora's input or guidance. The package was complete. It was accurate. It documented everything that had actually happened, and it had been transmitted 7 minutes ago to people who would act on it before morning. She looked at Voss. He was reading her face, and she let him read it, all of it, the full calculation and its conclusion. "The package is transmitted," she said. "Complete and accurate. The routing records are in it." Salazar closed his eyes. 1 second. 2. Then he opened them and looked at the ceiling and exhaled. A long, controlled breath. The kind that came from a person accepting the shape of something they had known was possible but had believed they might outrun. Voss released him. Not gently. He stepped back with the deliberate precision of a man choosing not to do something he had prepared himself to do. And the choosing was its own kind of violence, visible in the set of his shoulders and the line of his jaw, and the way his hands moved to his sides and stayed there. Salazar straightened, touched the blood on his face with 2 fingers, looked at them. "Victor," Voss said. Salazar looked at him. "You had 14 years, Voss said. You could have said you wanted out." Something crossed Salazar's face, something that was not entirely performance, not entirely strategy, something underneath those things that was rawer and older. "You would have let me go," Salazar said. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't quite a statement. It was a thing he was saying to hear how it sounded. "I don't know," Voss said. "I never got the chance to find out." The 2 men looked at each other. 14 years in that look. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, nothing that clean. Just the full weight of the fact that the life they had built together had been, for one of them, a structure to dismantle from the inside for the last 2.5 years. And for the other, something he had believed was real until 48 hours ago. In the distance, sirens. Faint, not close yet, but present. The package had landed somewhere and someone had moved fast. "We need to decide the next 10 minutes, Evelyn said. The decision took less than 10 minutes to make and longer than that to execute. Voss called his attorney, a man named Crane, who answered on the second ring at 5 in the morning with the specific wakefulness of someone who had built a career around being available at exactly these hours. He spoke to him for 4 minutes. Evelyn listened to his side of the conversation and built the shape of what he was agreeing to from the fragment she could hear, cross-referencing it against the calculation she had been running in her own head since the moment the transmission confirmed. Salazar's team, the 3 men who hadn't been neutralized in the breach, were in the custody of Voss's people by the time the conversation ended. The man who had gone for the freight elevator had been stopped at street level. Nobody was dead. That was the first fact she confirmed and held on to. Voss came back to where she was standing. He looked at her, and she looked at him, and neither of them said anything for a moment. "You're going to cooperate," she said. Not a question. Full cooperation with the federal prosecutor's office. Financial records, operational records, everything they need to prosecute Salazar, Marsh, and the second contact. He paused. "In exchange for a negotiated agreement on my own exposure." "That's not immunity." "No," he said. "It's not." He said it without flinching. "My attorney thinks we can negotiate something that doesn't involve a trial. The financial cooperation alone is worth significant consideration." "You'll lose everything," she said. "The organization, the holdings, most of the legitimate businesses." "I know what I'll lose," he said. She looked at him. "Why?" He looked back at her for a long moment. Outside, the sirens were closer. The pre-dawn light was beginning at the edges of the high windows. "Because you're right that it needs to go to a court," he said. "And because I'm tired." He said the last 3 words with the same weight Salazar had used in Nora's account of the phone call 11 months ago, and she wondered if both men had arrived at the same exhaustion by different routes and at different times and had made different choices about what to do with it. And because the man who came here tonight to stop you from sending that package is not the man I want to be for the rest of my life. Du is Paul Policherneken. She held the words, turned them over, looked for the angle, the performance, the strategy underneath them. She found the calculation. She always found the calculation. But this time the calculation pointed to the same place the words pointed to, and she didn't know what to do with that except accept it as data. The sirens stopped outside. "That's federal," one of Voss's men said from near the window. 2 vehicles. Voss nodded. He didn't move toward the door or away from it. He looked at Evelyn one more time. "The invitation," he said. "What?" "From the gala." When this is done, however long that takes, I'm going to find that invitation and frame it. Something in his expression, not the controlled mask, not the operational assessment, something that existed below both of those things and came up rarely and without apparent intention, the thing she had glimpsed at the gala when he'd said request, and again in the hotel room when he'd said agreed, because it's the most expensive thing that's ever accidentally happened to me. She looked at him. Her thumb found her palm and pressed, and she made herself stop. Get through the next 6 months first, she said. Yes, he said, I intend to. The door opened. Federal agents, 3 of them, with the expressions of people who had been handed a 73-page financial document package at 5 in the morning and had arrived still trying to read it. Behind them, a woman in a suit who was not an agent, the federal prosecutor's office. Evelyn identified her from the specific quality of how she held herself in a space that wasn't hers, the practiced neutrality of an officer of the court who had learned to walk into chaos without becoming part of it. Evelyn stepped forward. My name is Evelyn Pierce. I'm the forensic accountant who transmitted the package you received. I'm prepared to provide full testimony regarding the financial analysis. The woman looked at her, at the cracked laptop under her arm, at the champagne stain on her dress, still faintly visible from a gala that had happened in what felt like a different week. Ms. Pierce, she said, I've read 40 pages of your package in the last 20 minutes. A pause. I have questions. I have answers, Evelyn said. I'll start wherever you want. The next 4 months were the longest of her life, and also, in a way she couldn't have anticipated, the most clarifying. The legal process was not clean. Nothing about it was clean. Federal investigations were not the crisp sequential procedures she had encountered as a witness and analyst. They were slow and iterative and frequently frustrating, full of moments where the evidence she had built was questioned, supplemented, challenged, and rebuilt in the specific language of prosecutorial procedure that translated her forensic architecture into something admissible. She testified twice before a federal grand jury. She sat through 11 hours of deposition in the case against Alan Marsh, whose attorney was very good and whose client was, in the end, not good enough to escape what Evelyn had found inside the Meridian Shield filings. Marsh pleaded guilty to federal corruption charges 6 weeks before trial. His second contact, a senior FBI supervisory agent named Dennis Fowler, the name she had never been able to find in her own records but that Voss had confirmed on the phone that last night in the warehouse, was indicted on separate charges and was still fighting them when the rest of the case resolved. Victor Salazar's trial lasted 3 weeks. He did not take the stand. His attorneys argued the access log anomaly extensively. 2 days of testimony about the code cloning, the physical location impossibility, the construction of a defense that Salazar had built into his offense with the same thoroughness he had applied to everything else. It was, Evelyn thought, sitting in the gallery on day 9, genuinely impressive work. The jury took 4 hours. She was not in the courthouse when the verdict came. She was in her office, her new office, 3 rooms on the 6th floor of a building in Chelsea that she had rented 2 months ago and furnished with 4 monitors and a new legal pad stand and a coffee maker that was significantly better than the one she'd had on West 84th Street. Chart was on the filing cabinet in a patch of afternoon light, apparently asleep, one orange paw hanging over the edge. Her phone rang, an attorney she knew from the prosecutor's office. She listened, said thank you, hung up, sat with it for a moment, guilty on all counts. She wrote it on the top of a fresh legal pad page and then sat looking at what she'd written, which was 3 words that represented 2.5 years of Salazar's careful construction and 73 pages of her dismantling it, and 4 months of process and 2 days of jury deliberation, and 14 years of a relationship between 2 men that had ended in a warehouse before dawn. She tore the page off the pad, set it aside, opened the next case file. She had 4 active clients, 2 banks, 1 insurance group, 1 individual. A woman named Rosa Garza, who had been defrauded of her life savings through a real estate investment scheme, and who had come to Evelyn's office 3 weeks ago with a manila folder full of documents that she had been carrying around for 8 months because she didn't know what else to do with them, and no one had taken her seriously. Evelyn had taken her seriously. She had found the fraudulent pattern in the 3rd document. She had called Rosa Garza that same evening to tell her what she'd found and listened to the silence on the other end of the line. 2, 3 seconds. Before Rosa said, very quietly, I knew something was wrong. I knew it. That was what the work was for, Evelyn thought. Not for the architecture of criminal enterprise and the forensic elegance of its dismantling. For Rosa Garza's 2 seconds of silence, and then I knew something was wrong. She opened the Rosa Garza file and started reading. Voss's cooperation agreement took 5 months to finalize. She knew this from news coverage, not from him. He had not contacted her in the 4 months since the warehouse, and she had not contacted him, and she had told herself this was correct and appropriate, and she believed it, except for approximately one evening, a week when she didn't quite believe it, and then went back to believing it again by morning. She tracked the progress of the legal proceedings the way she tracked everything, with attention and distance and the specific professional detachment she had spent 12 years cultivating. The cooperation agreement was reported in a financial news publication with access to federal court filings. Damien Voss had surrendered financial records, operational documentation, and direct testimony regarding 11 separate criminal enterprises connected to his organization's activities over the previous decade. In exchange, the federal prosecutor's office had agreed to a negotiated resolution on his own exposure, no trial, a structured financial penalty, and a period of supervised cooperation that would extend 18 months. The Voss organization, as it had existed for 15 years, was dissolved. The legitimate businesses, the restaurant group, the real estate development holdings that were not implicated in money laundering, were sold or transferred in negotiated arrangements. The charitable foundation was wound down and its assets transferred to established nonprofits under court supervision. New York, the article noted, would take some time to adjust to the absence of Damien Voss from its power structures. Some things, it observed, left gaps when they were removed. She read the article twice, then she closed it and went back to the Garza case, which was almost ready to hand to the attorneys. It was an autumn evening when he came to her office. She heard the door. She had a small waiting area outside her actual workspace, separated by a glass partition, and she could see it from her desk. He came through it without a hat or coat, despite the cold, in dark clothing that was simpler than anything she had seen him in before, with the look of a person who had recently shed something heavy and was still calibrating the absence of its weight. She had not told him where the office was. She had, she reflected, not told him many things, which meant he had found them out anyway, which was consistent. She unlocked the glass partition door and opened it. He stood on the other side of it and looked at her. His face was different. Not softer, not the word. More weathered, maybe. More honest in the way that faces got honest when they had been through something that burned off the performance layers. "You look tired," she said. "I am tired," he said. "I've been tired for about 6 months." That's accurate. He looked at her for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and produced something she hadn't expected and then immediately had. A framed item, small, maybe 4 inches by 6. He held it out. It was the gala invitation. She took it. It was framed simply, dark wood, and under the glass, the heavy cardstock with the Voss Foundation's embossed letterhead and the event details, and in the corner, the date. 3 months ago, which felt like several lifetimes. She looked at it for a long moment. "You said you were going to frame it," she said. "I said I intended to get through the next 6 months first," he said. "It took 5. She looked up at him. He was watching her with that quality she had spent 3 months not thinking about. The one that was not performance, not strategy. The one that had nowhere to go but directly at whatever it was directed at. "I'm not the same person I was at that gala," he said. "I'm not asking you to decide anything about a person who no longer exists. I'm asking you to decide about whoever I'm in the process of becoming, which I recognize is a significant ask because neither of us knows yet what that is." "You're aware that's not a reassuring thing to say." "I know," he said. "I'm trying to be honest rather than persuasive. You told me once that numbers didn't pretend. I'm trying not to pretend." She looked at the invitation in her hands, at the date on it, at the embossed letterhead of an organization that no longer existed. She thought about the rain on the cab window 3 months ago, the spreadsheet on the gala's screen for 11 seconds, the conference room with the water pitcher, the hotel corridor where she had stood in front of an open elevator and heard his voice say one word and stopped. She thought about Nora Bast, who had accepted a plea agreement on a single charge of obstruction related to the communication routing records. a charge that Evelyn had given testimony on and had been honest about, completely and without softening, because the truth was the truth, and it was what she did. Nora was in Portland now, she had heard, starting over in the specific, difficult way that starting over required when you were doing it, because the alternative had collapsed. Evelyn had sent her a message 3 weeks ago. Nora had replied. It was short and not warm, but it was a reply. And Evelyn had filed it under things that might, with time and work, become something. She thought about Rosa Garza's 2 seconds of silence on the phone. I knew something was wrong. She set the framed invitation on her desk, looked at it there, then looked at him. I have 4 active cases, she said. I work 12-hour days, I have a cat who is mean, and I have an anxiety disorder that means I need a significant amount of time and space that has nothing to do with you or anyone else. I don't know how to do this, whatever this is, in any of the ways that movies suggest it should be done, and I would need you to understand that from the start. Something changed in his face. The thing she had seen twice before, the fractional shift when she said something he hadn't expected and had chosen to let register. I don't know how to do this either, he said. I've spent 15 years making sure I didn't have to learn, so we're starting from the same place. She looked at him, turned her thumbnail against her palm, made herself stop. There's a coffee place across the street, she said. It's not good coffee, but it's open. All right, he said. She got her jacket from the hook by the partition door. Chart opened one eye from the filing cabinet and regarded Voss with the specific contemptuous assessment that Chart applied to everything that was not Evelyn or a sunlit surface, and then closed it again. Your cat, Voss said. Chart, she said. He's mean. I noticed. You'll get used to it. She said it without quite deciding to, and then she heard the words in the air between them and didn't take them back. He held the door. They walked out through the waiting area and down the hallway and into the elevator. She pressed the button for the lobby and the doors closed, and for a moment they were standing side by side in the small mirrored space. And she looked at their reflections. A man in dark clothing who was in the process of becoming someone he didn't fully know yet, and a woman in a jacket with a cracked phone in her pocket, and champagne that had been washed out but had left a faint ghost of a stain on the cuff of her dress. The dress she had worn to a gala she had never meant to attend. Nora's okay, she said. In case you were wondering. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. I kept track. She thought about what that cost him, the specific effort of a man who had every reason to be angry at Nora Bast, choosing instead to keep track of whether she was okay. Filed it under the column she was still building, the one she didn't have a label for yet. The elevator opened on the lobby. They walked out into the autumn evening. The street was loud and particular and cold in the way that New York streets were cold when the temperature had just turned and the city was still negotiating with the season. She could smell the coffee place from here, and she had been right that it wasn't good coffee, but it was hot, and it was close, and it was somewhere to sit across from a person and begin the uncertain work of figuring out what came after everything had changed. He walked beside her and matched her pace without adjusting it to be slower or deliberate, which she noted as a small and specific kindness. Behind them in her office, on her desk under the window where the city light came through, the framed invitation sat next to the open Garza case file. An embossed date. A room she had walked into by accident. 11 seconds on a screen. She had not changed his life, she thought. That was the wrong frame for it. He had arrived at the place where his life needed to change on his own, through the accumulation of 15 years of choices and their consequences. And she had been the proximate cause of the final collapse. The woman with the spreadsheet, the wrong room, the accidental revelation in front of 600 witnesses. But the change was his. She had only made it impossible to postpone. What she had done, she thought, stepping off the curb and crossing the street with him beside her in the October cold, was show up in the right place at the wrong time with the right set of skills, and had the specific stubbornness not to disappear afterward. That, she decided, was enough. It was in fact exactly enough. The coffee place door was warm when she pushed it open, and the noise and light came out to meet them, and she walked through it first without waiting to see if he would follow. He followed. In the months that came after, the city adjusted, as cities did. The gaps left by the dissolution of old structures were filled by new ones, some better and some not, in the unpredictable way that power vacuums resolved themselves into new arrangements that would, eventually, require their own accounting. 3 federal cases went to trial. 2 were resolved before that. The investigation Evelyn had initiated with a 73-page document package transmitted from a cracked laptop in a warehouse at 5 in the morning produced, in the end, 21 individual charges, 9 convictions, 4 plea agreements, and the involuntary retirement of 2 federal officials who had believed themselves sufficiently insulated from accountability to behave as though accountability did not apply to them. They were wrong. The numbers had said so. Rosa Garza recovered 68% of what had been taken from her, which was not everything and was not nothing, and she sent Evelyn a card at Christmas that said, in handwriting that pressed hard into the paper the way that certain people's handwriting did when they were trying to make something real, "Thank you for believing the numbers." Evelyn kept the card. She pinned it above the 4 monitors where she could see it from wherever she was sitting in the room. Chart continued to be mean. And on an evening in late November, Evelyn Pierce stood at her office window looking at the city that had, 3 months ago, tried to swallow her whole and failed, and she thought about all the things she had not planned for and could not have planned for. The package in the mailbox, the rain, the Bluetooth pairing setting she had never adjusted, the 11 seconds. And she found that she was not afraid of the unplanned things the way she had been before. She was, instead, something she did not have a clean word for. She looked at the framed invitation on her desk. She went back to work.